This is Chris Norm. Welcome back to another episode as we talk now more specifically about protective gear. Now, in a previous episode, we talked about in general some different equipment that beekeepers use. Now we're going to focus more on the protective gear you use. Now, this will depend whether you have a few hives or a lot of hives. You're going to spend 30 minutes in your backyard, or you're going to spend hours and hours in different apiaries. May depend on what types of bee equipment and protective equipment you use. In this case, these are kind of the suggestions, or at least what we use in our apiary here, as well as other ones we have in the area. So one, of course, is gloves. Now, there's different types of gloves. There's disposable gloves you can use and leather gloves. Now, depending on the season as well as what you're doing, sometimes I do choose to get leather gloves, but also if you're going to be very dexterity is important, right? When you're kind of taking frames and inspecting, I do suggest using disposable gloves because you can feel around. If you can't feel around, the odds of squishing some bees become much more of a possibility. So disposable gloves are good. Plus, it helps new beekeepers understand that if they make a mistake, they may actually, obviously the bees might sting them in that case. So it helps to kind of be aware of their surroundings a little more. Now, for protective gear, I do like the longer rubber boots. Now, again, depending on where you're located, this may not be a necessity. But if you have different apiaries or if your backyard is long grass and ticks are abundant, then these long rubber boots would be a necessity for you. If you're just in the backyard, then you can probably just go with some regular shoes. Keep in mind, if you're doing inspections, and also you're going to be looking at the frame rate, you might probably notice bees will fall off of that sometimes as they're running through the frame, and that they might actually fall off into your shoe. And then the closest way to get warm is inside of your suit. Just kind of keep that aware. Typically, if possible, I like to wear long rubber boots. Now, again, you can have a long protective suit like this or a half jacket. And again, it depends on how long you'll probably be in the bee yard and what your kind of comfortability is. I do suggest, though, like in the previous video, to wear some type of protective gear, because especially if you're going to spend hours and hours in your bee yard, when you get hot and dehydrated, the odds of making a mistake are much, much greater. And so you want to kind of have a protective gear to protect you in case you kind of lose track of things sometimes. And so also you sort of have a belt or a fanny pack, if you will, I guess you could say, which I have a lot of my necessities right there. So queen cages, I have markers, I have my hive tools, rubber bands. All these are at my disposal depending on what I'm doing, but a lot of times I have this on me, making sure in case I run across something, I had the tools needed. Now, again, one issue that we've found, probably you found this too, is sometimes the bees will want to crawl into your suit, especially if it's a cold morning or a cold day, maybe in early spring or late fall. If you're doing kind of some modifications, they want to crawl into a warm area. So I like having rubber bands. This kind of seals the suit a little more to make sure that bees cannot crawl in there. Also, hats are really nice too, especially if you have the veils like this, which go over. Some have a hat, you've noticed, and that's fine too, but these really require a hat. If you don't have one, it's going to squish to your face, and that CO2 coming in your mouth will attract sometimes bees who are being defensive, and it'll sting your face. So again, a hat helps you kind of get that veil away from your face. So these are the probably necessities for beekeeping. And again, depending on your interests and depending on what your environment is, you could change this up. We'll just give you an idea of what we use, what we recommend in our bee yards. And so we appreciate your journey with us. Happy beekeeping.